The sister of the Porsche Taycan is often overlooked as the budget version of the two cars. However, while both are built on the J1 platform, each manufacturer agreed to find their own dynamic identity for the cars. The concept was first seen in November 2018, before production started in 2020, and orders arrived to customers in March 2021. The Audi and Porsche share roughly 40% of their parts, but unlike many cars that are constructed on sister platforms, the two cars are built in separate facilities, with Audi's specialist facility used to build the R8, selected for the GT. For used buyers not so bothered about giant horsepower or bragging rights of their GT sprint times, there was originally an entry quattro model, matched up with an RS model for a dual offering, which was much more limited than the Taycan, but retains the higher specification drivelines with all-wheel drive. However, the naming system along with the power is changed at the end of 2024 when the GT gets a refresh and is now the S, RS and RS Performance. We'll come on to the power later in the guide, but it's important to note that no matter which model you get, you'll have a dual-speed rear motor and a single speed from the front motor, which is retained, giving the e-tron a character that is different from many EV rivals and helping efficiency slightly for those of you covering lots of miles on highways, as the rear can slip into its second speed, reducing rotational speed. If you go for a facelift RS model, you'll get the addition of a mechanical slip differential rather than just torque vectoring, and software to punch you from a standard start to illegal speeds in the blink of an eye, although you'll need to use launch control to force the car to transmit all of its power from idle. From those that come to the miles driven for those little extra gems, the CD factor, a measure of how slippery through the air a car is as low as 0.24, although raises to 0.26 in the RS Performance. This helps it increase its range, although the Taycan scored a marginally better 0.22 and Audi's new A6 e-tron gets 0.21. To put this into context, the current generation RS6 scores a 0.35 CD factor. I should note that several things have impacted sales for the Etron GT, and so finding the right car for the specification and colour that you want will be a bit more challenging than on the Taycan. With a launch at the peak of lockdowns and supply chain issues, the 2021 sales were always going to be slower, especially as the Etron GT was always destined to be more limited option on the J1 platform. In 2022 things improved, and 2023 was one of the strongest sales years, with a slight reduction in 2024 as the expectation of a refreshed model and the factory's last push of the special R8 run-out editions became critical before new regulations sent the Audi supercar out to pasture. Audi has also been finding a general downturn in sales like many brands, although Audi is feeling this across the board of models, with the Q3 being their ongoing success story. I should mention that despite the lower build numbers of the GT model, it hasn't protected it from poor residual values, meaning that while there are relative bargains if you're looking on the used market, they are likely to continue to lose money at a faster rate than the equivalent petrol, diesel or hybrid car. Moving on to safety, and unfortunately there is no report for the e-tron GT. It was not tested, but its sister car the Taycan was, scoring a full 5 stars at Euro NCAP. Next up are the common faults, and it's been a while, so I'll remind you all to check out the Miles Driven book and website if you want more, and to add a like to the video if you think it deserves it. Channel memberships are now also offered. First is an issue reported throughout 2022 by owners suffering a dead pedal on accelerating when stopped. Owners have reported that cars were not responding to the accelerator pedal pressure after waiting at the lights. The answer for some was to shut the car down and then restart it. There has since been a dealer fix to resolve this issue under warranty, but ask an owner if you look for previous service receipts to see if the car ever had any issue if looking at a 2021 or 2022 car. In 2023 there was a stop sale notice on e-tron GT models due to a battery fire risk. Fortunately I couldn't find owners reporting suffering this, but a recall was issued to a batch of cars, so if looking at a 2023 model it's worth checking the service work to see if it was an affected chassis. Electrical systems separate of the battery pack have been reported to fail. The most common affected areas were the centre console and the cameras not working, so make sure all of these work as normal on a test drive. The rear spoiler had a few reported issues, all were for not raising when commanded either manually or automatically, although this issue is usually linked to a different software glitch affecting the cameras. Some owners found that regenerative braking systems do give a pedal feel that was inconsistent. Although this isn't necessarily a fault, you may notice this on test drive, and from the guides that I've done on electric cars, this doesn't appear to be a problem isolated to Audi. However, the larger size of the car seems to cause owners more upset. A strong advisory is to avoid any car that an owner is selling either needing a replacement part or waiting for one. While many replacement parts don't affect how the car drives, the e-Tron GT can have very long wait times for some parts, and if someone is selling that problem onto you, it may be months before you get the repair or the part that you need if it's a specific component of the GT model. It just isn't worth buying someone else's headache on this one. As with most used cars, tyres are well worth checking before buying, but as the faster GT models wear their tyres at a higher rate, it is worth negotiating if the tyres are still legal but don't have much time left, as replacing all four, as is usually required, will add a sizable addition to your new car purchase price. A few owners have reported battery degradation, however in all cases I could find, Audi's 8-year battery warranty took effect and got them a replacement if there was a noticeable and sudden change, rather than the predictable small degradation expected from all electric car batteries. I will note against these failures that the e-Tron GT is built in small numbers, and I was dealing with a much smaller sample size than usual, and the occurrence of faults was still low in general, with a 1-2% failure rate of 1 or 2 items more common, meaning most owners haven't reported any issues with their e-Tron GT. Next up are the recalls, and in 2021 there was a single recall for the front suspension due to a retaining ring on the air strut that could loosen. In 2022 there were 5 recalls. The first was for the rear seat belt buckle assembly due to a wiring harness obstruction. Second was a simple error in the owner's manual listing the wrong tyre pressures. Third was a larger recall across the VW group for a software issue on the main display screen. This was followed up by another identical recall for a wider batch of vehicles, and then the front struts on a different batch of vehicles were recalled for the retaining ring. There were 2 recalls in 2023, the first for a poor seal around the battery pack that could allow liquid to reach the batteries and so needed resealing. The second was for a charging cable due to the risk of overheating an outlet when the vehicle reaches 100% charge. In 2024 there were 4 recalls, starting with the battery after a report of short circuits in the modules. The second recall expanded the number of affected vehicles. A critical safety recall was third, as the front brake hoses were at risk of leaking. Then finally there was a software recall again to resolve the short circuits of the battery. Moving on to the engines, or in this case the batteries and motors. First though, I'll note that the vehicle has an 800 volt architecture, of which there is a nominal voltage of 725 volts, and uses a CCS charger. Charge times quoted by Audi are 18 minutes for a 10 to 80% charge if using the vehicle's charging capability, however most chargers are not capable of fulfilling this. 9 hours and 15 minutes home charge is quoted to get to 80% capacity, and for those of you that like every last detail, cathode material is NCM622 and the cell used is an LG Chem E66A. First is the 2 launch models that both get 93.4 kWh batteries with a usable capacity of 85 kWh. I'll note different markets have optional packs depending on the territory, including Vorsprung and Touring, however I'll focus on the world market base specification of Quattro here. All Quattro models will have 469 brake horsepower, although a boost feature can temporarily output 530 brake horsepower. The 0 to 62 mph or 0 to 100 km time was recorded at 4.1 seconds. Note that several options on this specification are not available in some markets. For example, most cannot specify locking rear differential or e-Tron sound pack on the non-RS model. The Quattro model specification seems to do the most miles and was the most popular seller when new, likely because, unlike the Porsche Taycan, Audi just offered this model, which most business buyers found was more than they needed, or an RS model. As you'll have noticed throughout the guide, battery recalls and complaints are not unheard of. Fortunately, these will be under 8-year warranty at the time of the video's release, removing some concern for used buyers, and you can take confidence in the owners who have suffered a major issue have found Audi were quick to attend and look at what repairs are needed when it came to battery complaints. Although I should note the battery warranty is also mileage limited to 100,000 miles, that's 160,000 kilometers, although countries with metric measurements for distance may need to check that it's always a like-for-like distance in the warranty. The Quattro model is then dropped in 2024. Moving on to the RS, and you'll get the same battery as the Quattro until 2024, when it gets a larger battery and is relegated to the middle specification from the earlier top specification, but it's the top model in 2021 to 2024, and the RS boosts the power figures of the Quattro, reducing the 0 to 62 mph or 0 to 100 km time to 3.3 seconds, assuming you can find a single road in good enough condition and with speed laws allowing you to attempt it. This faster acceleration is accomplished thanks to higher power output of 590 brake horsepower, which can also be boosted for short intervals of up to 637 brake horsepower. Battery complaints don't seem to be more or less reported from the RS from the Quattro model, but far fewer RS E-Tron GT models exist, so it is harder to conclusively say that the rate of problems is the same, as the sample size for the RS is much smaller. A side note before we move on to the recently released 2025 specification vehicles, I am quoting 0 to 62 mph times or 0 to 100 km times that are defined by Porsche's standard of testing, which conforms to Global Technical Regulation UN-GTR 21. This starts the measurements as soon as the vehicle accelerates under full load, or in this case instantly, as launch control is used for testing. There is no runout or other non-global conforming method used, although test conditions are optimised to give the most accurate, but also ideal conditions for the vehicle. Into 2025 models, and as these are newly released, I can't speak on reliability, but we'll go through specification. Battery packs have increased in size with a usable 96 kWh, and better chemistry for the batteries helps boost efficiency and charge times, although the larger battery will still take more time to charge at home. The e-Tron S is the new base model, the RS is the mid-power specification, and the new range topper is the RS Performance. Acceleration with launch control starting with the S is 3.4, then 2.8 in the RS and 2.5 seconds in the RS Performance for the 0 to 62 mph or 0 to 100 km time. Power is rated at 583, 764 and 831 brake horsepower, plus a boost to pass available to the RS model that increases power temporarily. However, that isn't the most powerful these cars can be because, as we know, it is only men on horses and women behind sled dogs that need less than 500 brake horsepower on a morning commute, and once at work the number one complaint across the globe that people have with their cars is not having nearly 1,000 brake horsepower to launch themselves into the nearest tree upon leaving the office. And so, good news, max figures for all cars in launch mode are just about capable 670 brake horsepower in the S, a more convincing 844 brake horsepower in the RS, and then to quench the thirst of the many, 912 brake horsepower in the RS Performance. So onto our picks, and on a budget, a nice specification Quattro model will be all the EV most need, and because it is rarer than its sister car, it will still turn heads while doing 238 miles of official range. Launch model road testers beat this EPA rating for a vehicle range by roughly 25 miles or 40 kilometers. However, the high budget pick for those pilots that live at the end of a runway and refuse to wake up until the plane is ready for them to commute directly to the end of the marble smooth taxiway, well, oh boy, Audi has built the car for you, the RS Performance GT. If you're not convinced on the RS GT, how about the Porsche Taycan guide next, or how about the Polestar 2? And as ever, all the best with your car search.